This week we are taking a little bit closer look at ancient Near Eastern religions, and there are just four that I want to review quickly with you. The first is the religion of Mesopotamia. It varies a little bit from place to place, but generally, as we discussed before, they are polytheist. They believe in more than one god. They are fairly pessimistic. They think that the gods are cruel and that life is unpredictable. And they have a lot of gods. Each city-state, because they were politically isolated and geographically isolated, tended to come up with their own names for the gods. And then when cities were conquered in empires, instead of making everybody use the same names, they all just kept their different names, which is why so many. Their key religious text is called the Enuma Elish. And the Epic of Gilgamesh, even though we consider it a literary work, the first epic in the West, also has religious elements. For instance, it contains the story of the Great Flood, which is very similar to the flood story of the Jewish Bible, or what the Christians call the Old Testament. They also have a very dismal afterlife. They kind of float around and they eat dust in the afterlife. So they continue to exist, but it is not happy. Last week I talked a bit about the evolution of religious belief and how we went from people believing there was a God in this particular river to that God being the God of all rivers and then God being the God of everything. And you can see a phase in this evolution in these two small artifacts. On the left, the goddess of rainstorms. And on the right, my favorite, the god of the four winds. And I particularly like this statue because he has four faces each side. Each cardinal direction has a face to represent the different winds and their own beards, which is kind of interesting too. There are creatures that are supernatural but not gods in Mesopotamian religion as well, sort of like Christian angels, I guess. The guardians, the Lamassu. And you'll see lots of variations on this image that you have on the slide at Assyrian palaces particularly, as an example. So you have this creature that's kind of part lion, part bull, part bird, part human, and its job is to protect the palace or whatever building it's put on. And this one is from the Oriental Institute in Chicago, but the one that I saw in the British Museum, I only came up to about here, to the top of the leg on it, just to give you an idea of the size. So these are huge, and they're really meant to intimidate you if you were thinking about doing something bad. This is a priest, probably, again from the Oriental Institute in Chicago, but I thought he was kind of interesting. He shows us, like we saw last week, the bare chest, the kind of knee-length skirt or kilt that Mesopotamian men seem to have worn. And he also has this heavy eye makeup, which we often associate with Egyptians. And one of the interesting findings from science that's come out, I think just last year, there was a big study on this. The makeup that they used was not just for looks, because it's actually kind of funny looking if you think about it, but it had the effect of keeping bugs out of their eyes. These are climates where you get lots of those little bugs that like to live around bodies of water, and they can bite at the skin around the rim of your eye and cause disease, in addition to being irritating. So this makeup would protect against that. So to switch to Egypt, they too are polytheist, have more than one god. But unlike Mesopotamia, optimistic. Again, these things are review. They have a unified list of gods. Not every city has its own. And this makes sense because their political organization is unified, so their religion is more unified. One of their key texts is the Book of the Dead, which is a guidebook to the afterlife and something you'll be looking at in your activities this week. And of course, they mummified their dead to prepare them for a fantastic afterlife in which they took lots of things with them. Cats and boats and food and servants, all kinds of fun things, if you could afford it. This is, again, from the Oriental Institute in Chicago, an example of a Book of the Dead. So it's not one single book. There are lots of these. And it's not a book the way we think of it. It's a papyrus scroll. But you'll see on the left Osiris, who's the god of the underworld. And kind of in the middle of the scroll, the weighing of the heart of the deceased against the feather of Ma'at. Ma'at is kind of divine balance, where everything has to be kept right in the world. And if the heart did not weigh the same as the feather, then the soul would be eaten by this crocodile guy here. If the soul, the heart, which is the soul, did weigh the same as the feather, then the soul could go to the afterlife. And these figures here, especially this one, with the jackal headdress, this is a priest of the god Anubis, and Anubis had been the god of the underworld until Osiris kind of kicked him out. So you're going to read about Osiris, Isis, and Horus in your assignments this week, and I wanted to put these images that were up last week of them again. So again, Osiris on the right, awaiting soul being judged. In the middle, his son Horus as a hawk, which is his symbol. And on the left, his mother Isis holding baby Horus. So you can kind of keep in mind these images as you're reading their myth. Judaism is one we have not talked about yet, so this one will be a bit new. But the Jews developed monotheism. They weren't monotheists to start with, but like other religions, it evolves. They're polytheist, and then they start to favor one particular god. They see him as their god, the chief god, and then they eventually say he's real and all the other gods are false, and that's when we get monotheism. Judaism is interested in ethics. You know, the choices that you have value to them, and it's connected to the religion. They also have prophets who are very interesting. The prophets are normally common people, and their job, they're chosen by God, is to keep the king on the right path, and the king is supposed to help the poor and the weak and follow God's law. And women could be prophets. There is a prophet Deborah, for example. So this is a kind of a revolutionary role that the Jews have. Their scriptures are called the Tanakh, and the first 5 books are called the Torah. So you'll see an image here of a modern Torah. Again, it's a scroll like the Egyptians had. We don't have books with pages until we get to early Christianity. And today, when Jews have their services, the Torah is processed around the congregation. It's a major focus point for them. Zoroastrianism developed among the Persians in the Persian Empire, and like Jews, they developed monotheism. Ahura Mazda was one of their many gods, and then they decided he was a chief god. And then this guy, Zoroaster, emerged as Ahura Mazda's prophet and said Ahura Mazda is the only god. So then they became monotheist. So Ahura Mazda is the god, Zoroaster was the prophet. It's kind of like Muhammad is the prophet, Allah is the god. Okay, they're dualist. They believe that the world is divided into good and evil, and that we all make choices between good and evil on a daily basis, and that the choices that we make influence what happens to us when we die. Do we go to paradise, or do we go to something like hell? And this is very influential on other religions, including Christianity. Their main text is called the Avesta, and it's fragmentary, but you'll have a link to it in your readings this week. The image is a common image for Zoroastrianism from a Zoroastrian tomb, and similar to the Assyrians, you see this kind of part bird, part human. I'm not even sure what these legs are, if they're bird legs or what, figure that you'll see over and over and over. Okay, so that's just to give you some visuals and some very basic categories for the religions that you'll be exploring this week.